What's going on? I'll be Fitness Gaming, and you seen the title of the video, you know why you're here. Domain Zoo. So I haven't played Magic in probably like over a year and a half. So a lot of things have changed. There's a lot of new cards, a lot of new decks. But I'm excited, and I'm back, baby, because Domain Zoo is a deck. So before we get into the gameplay, I wanted to make a video on how I build my decks, how I get them ready in order to play test them whenever I want to try a new deck. So we're not going to complicate this. I'm going to show you exactly what I do. If you do it a different way, please comment at the bottom and let me know what you do. But this is what I do. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the first thing I do is I go to two websites. I go to MTG Goldfish and MTG Top 8. So the first thing I do is I will go to the popular decks at MTG Goldfish, Modern. I kind of look over the decks here, but we already know what deck we want to play. I wanted to play Domain Zoo, and this is the deck that I want to work on. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Domain Zoo. I don't pay too much attention to this initial deck that pops up here. The main thing that I start to look for is the card breakdown. Alright, so I see that 55% of them use this as their companion, and then I look at the creatures. So 4 of 100%, 4 of 97, 4 of 86, and as you can see here, I can already tell on this, for this deck, that these are the core creatures, right? So I know that the majority of decks, almost all of them, play these creatures. So we already know where we want to start with as far as creatures. Now we come to spells. Same thing goes for the spells. Lightning Bolt 93, Tribal Flames 93, Stubborn Denial 83, Dromoka's Command 1.4, and Remand 1.9. Enchantments 100%, almost 4, Leyline Binding. Now I go to the lands. I look over to the lands. Breeding Pool, Sacred Foundry, Steam Vents, Temple Garden. These I can already tell, and this is a very complex mana base for a 5-color zoo. So understanding how the mana works for this deck and the best way to put your mana together according to your spells is key. So I can already know that these are going to be the 4 lands, shock lands, that we're going to be using. I can also see here that I need a forest and a plains, as you can tell. And then it's going to show me here the top fetch lands and tri lands to use. And then here I can see kind of flex spots. So I kind of have a great idea here of how to build the mana base and how to build the deck. So once I look over this and I have a brief understanding here of what are the main cards that this deck is looking to play, I go to MTG Top 8. Then we go to same thing, Modern. I look for the deck here, 5-color aggro. And then we have a breakdown here. So before I compare the decks, I look at the dates. I want to keep my list as current as possible, right, to play test and make sure we're getting the right play testing done. So I look at the dates. I make sure that we're at least no more than 2 months, right? So December 1st, October 22nd, 21st. So we're good here. So we're just going to compare all these. So now we have all these decks. Now, I already know what are the main creature cards that are supposed to be played in this deck and the main spells. So we're going to go ahead and filter out the things that are not traditional to this deck. So Bloodbraid Elf, we know that that is not a card that they play, so we're going to go ahead and take that out. Fury, we know that's the card that they don't play, we're going to take that out. The reason we want to do this is because we want to get as close to a core version of the deck as possible. That way when we're playing it, we can kind of understand how it plays so that we can make our tweaks. Noble Hierarch, we know it does not play that. Snapcaster Mage, we know it doesn't play that. We know it doesn't play Tarmogoyf, and you can tell by the numbers here. Look at the numbers are extremely skewed, right? Like everything else is almost a 4 except for these very fringe variations. But we're trying to eliminate those. Alright, so now we have, I can see here that these are the cards that we're going to play. So pretty much a 4 of every creature, and it's comparable to what we see here. Perfect. So now we're going to go to the spells. Now the spells are kind of everywhere, but we're going to focus on the main cards. Leyline Binding, 4 of, Lightning Bolt, 4 of, Stubborn Denial, 4 of, Tribal Flames, 4 of. So we know that. Okay, we already know that from here. So that's good. So now we have to determine what are flex spots. So the flex spots, it looks here. So we see 1 mana leak. Mana leak is very low on the card. 1 path. We have almost 1% of Remand, and then we got 1.2 Dromoka's command. So, and then Teferi. So, let's see what we can eliminate here, because we want to narrow it down as much as possible, but we also don't want to complicate it. So, we probably don't care too much for path. It's a very low. Alright, so let's see here. Okay, so I mean this is narrowed down enough, right? So we know what are the main spells the deck is going to have, and then there's a few spots here. So as we can tell, 1.1 Dromoka's commands, how many Remands? 1. So these are pretty much tied, Dromoka's command and Remand. So we can already kind of tell that that is going to be the flex card that we're going to use. So now we got to figure out how many of them are we going to put in. So the first thing I look at is Dromoka's command. On average, how many do people play? So there's a few decks here with 2, but as you can tell, the majority of them play 1. So we're going to play 1. Remand. The decks that do play it, as you can tell here, it says 1, but the majority of decks that play Remand play 2. And then we can also notice here that the decks that do not play Remand play 2 Dromoka's commands. So based on that, we can tell that you either play 2 Remands or 0. So we're going to go to play with 2. And because we're playing 2, based on the information we have here, the decks that do play 2 Remands play 1 Dromoka's command. So that's what we're going to do. And it looks like whoever plays 2 Dromoka's command normally play other cards. See, like Teferi. You see Teferi here under that. So that's what we're going to play. So we know we're going to play for the flex spots now 2 Remands. So we're going to go ahead and narrow it down there. So now we have pretty much our deck here, right? And the reason I want to narrow it down like this is because now I can exactly know what mana base we're going to be playing. So here, look at the deck. Deck is pretty consistent here all around. So now we look at the mana. So, Arid Mesa, we have a 1 of. Blood Crypt, 0.6. This doesn't really get played. Breeding Pool, that goes in the deck. Flooded Strand, you know, let's see, 2 to 3 copies of Flooded Strand. 1 forest, 1 tri-land with the Plain Swamp and Forest. Misty Rainforest. Overgrown Tomb is a 0.4. Blood Crypt is slightly over that, so they're kind of similar. Stomping Ground 0.6, so most decks play. So I mean, those are flex spots like we saw here, right? The flex lands. There they are. So everything is pretty consistent. So from here I look, okay, so Xander's Lounge, everybody plays that, 1 of. So now that is the deck we're going to build, right? Like I know that I'm going to put all the core cards, and then the only choice I got to make is whether I want a Blood Crypt or a Overgrown Tomb or a Stomping Ground. I personally am going to go with Overgrown Tomb. I like the idea of having an untapped black source, and I also like having more green mana in my deck. As far as fetch lands here, we're going to go with Flooded Strand, Wooded Foothills, Windswept Heath, and probably a combination of one Misty, 1 Arid Mesa, or maybe a little bit more of Flooded Strand, since I do think it's a better fetch land than these. But that's what we're going to do, so that's easy to narrow down. I mean, not too much confusion there. Now we're going to look at the sideboard. So Jegantha probably gets played in most decks. Dromoka's commands a 1 of. Flusterstorm's a 2. Force of Vigor is pretty high on the list. Fury, not so much. Consume All, that's in all the list, so we definitely want to play that. Rest in Peace is on all the list. Teferi Time Ravelers, most all the list, so we want to play that. And Veil of Summer. And then we have Wear and Tear, which probably replaces the Force of Vigor. Yeah, it does. Because it plays better with Jegantha, so we'll play this. So there you have it. That's pretty much how I construct it really quickly. Go through it real quick, figure out what the core is, and then put the deck together. So now we have the deck together here. And the next step that I do here is, once I have everything put together, is specifically for this deck, I try to figure out how the lands work, because I understand that a 5-color deck where you're trying to get domain. You're trying to play 2 spells a turn. Some spells are double mana, different mana. So the mana is going to be very, very tricky, and you have to really understand what you're fetching out for. Otherwise, it could be disastrous. So we know that Wooded Foothills is the most played land in the deck, the most important land. And the reason for that is that Wooded Foothills, right off the bat, I can tell, can fetch out every land except for your basic plains. Now, the worst lands in this deck, I have to assume, are Forest, Basic Plains, and Overgrown Tomb. So not being able to fetch a basic plain is not a big deal. This is by far the best fetch land. The next one here is the Flooded Strand. Now, Flooded Strand can fetch out everything except for the Forest and the Overgrown Tomb. So not a big deal. Overgrown Tomb and Forest, 2 of the worst lands. So it's not a big deal. It can fetch out your tri-lands, which is the important part. Then these are what I would say probably the flex fetch lands here. So we have the 3 Windswept Heath and the 1, where is it? Misty Rainforest. Alright, so we'll go over the one of the Misty Rainforest. Misty Rainforest can grab everything except for Sacred Foundry, which is an important land, but not too bad. I mean, we can't win them all. And it cannot grab the plains. So we play one of them. Now, Windswept Heath, this is one that when I looked at it, it's kind of bad because it doesn't pick up your Xander's Lounge, and it doesn't pick up your Steam Vents, which are 2 important lands in the deck. But it does get your forests and your plains, which are also can be very vital in certain matchups. So we do play 3 of those. So that's the fetch land breakdown there. And then we have, of course, the let's see here, the shock lands. So we have the Breeding Pool, Overgrown Tomb, which is the flex spot, Sacred Foundry, Steam Vents, and Temple Garden. So we want to figure out here, so with the Xander's Lounge, the one that's going to pair up with this one is going to be the Temple Garden. So we have Island Swamp Mountain, and then Temple Garden gives us Forest and Plains. And then for the Triumph, this one we're going to need, this one has Plains, Swamp, Forest. So this one's going to pair with the Sacred Foundry. So now we know that those are going to be what creates our domain for 5 colors. So what are the second best lands to pool? Because guess what? We have 1-drop. So sometimes we want to play a Wild Nacatl on turn 1, or a Lightning Bolt, or a Ragavan, and we cannot play our domain, right? We don't want to play a top land. So what are the next combinations? So based off of this, I can tell that Temple Garden and Steam Vents, those give you 4 colors, and then we're going to get, and then Breeding Pool and Sacred Foundry give you 4 colors. So you either want Temple Garden and Steam Vents, or Breeding Pool and Sacred Foundry, and an Overgrown Tomb is just going to basically be a forest and helps you create the 5-color domain. So there you have the lands there, and then like we looked already at the deck, everything is pretty straightforward. So that's what I do. That's how I build my decks. And then I play games, and then from there I make the tweaks. And of course, every few weeks you want to redo what we did here to make sure that the list is up to date, because lists are constantly changing. But luckily for us, Domain Zoo, pretty straightforward deck. But yeah, that's what I do. If you guys do it any other way, any other website to use, any other things, any other tools, please comment at the bottom. Let me know. I hope this video is informative. I hope this video helps you. And let's go ahead and jump into some games.